Good afternoon. Thank you, Business World, Anurag and Harvinder, for calling me out here. And thank you, audience, for being out here listening to some of the most interesting conversations. Before I begin, my informal initiation to circularity happened about 15 years ago on a trip to Nainital. We're traveling with family. Coming back from Nainital, we had a packet of chips, finished it, and a natural inclination to down the window and throw it out. My youngest son was sitting in front, he must have been about 10 or 12 years. He told the driver, stop the car. He got out of the car and stood outside and said, Papa, go and pick it up. So I said, listen, where do you want to put kachra? Is kachra better outside or inside the car? So he said, it's people like you who are educated and who are still continuing to do it. I will not get into the car unless you are picking it up. So shamelessly, I learned my lesson, went and picked up that packet and carried it all the way to Delhi where I lived in those days. And I think that is possibly the last time I had consciously littered. Now the subject today is plastic circularity. And what is the next wave? I think when we look at plastic, the journey possibly started in 1907 with Bakelite switches, and 1913 when the PVC was patented by Augustus from in Germany, to 1973 when PET started getting commercially produced, and I would say the biggest leap of faith in plastic was in 1982 when a polyurethane heart was implanted into a human being. So plastics have come a long way. And as you can see, it's a very versatile material which is cost effective, easy to produce. And that's been the journey of plastic. It's become an integral part of our life, whichever way you look at it. From your seats in an aircraft to the toothbrush you'd pick up first thing in the morning, the touch of plastic about everything that we deal with. But there's a big difference, there's a subtle difference I would say. When we're talking about metals, we don't say lead, iron and gold are metals, right? We pronounce them by lead, gold, iron and treat them differently. But plastic, I think, is somewhere there's a misnomer that you club all this into plastic. It is true, it's plastic, but I think there are different types of plastic and your recyclability of these plastics are very different. I think that's an understanding that all of us need to imbibe. Maybe just because this product or this material is about just 100 years old, we might discover nomenclatures and names for differentiating them from one another. There is a sense that packaging possibly is the biggest contributor to plastic consumption. Not really. It's about 1/3 of it. But there is 2/3 which is going into various other aspects. Now, I come from Bisleri and we are in the business of providing safe and pure mineral water. So it's not my intention here to defend plastic in any manner. We look at a packaging solution which enables our product to be delivered to consumers at an affordable cost. So these are the criteria we look at in terms of defining what would be the ideal material. It has to be functionally equivalent or superior, cost effective and viable for use, environmentally benign in some manner, and from a physical property standpoint, it has to conform to safety. And finally, sometimes people come up with these fancy ideas to me and say, sir, maybe Bisleri can introduce this particular packaging. And I discover this idea is great, but not scalable or scalable at an enormous cost. And people are not willing to pay that kind of a money to buy your product. Now, do we know that just about this kind of plastic extends the life of a product significantly? And if you actually allow that food to rot, it's going to generate 5x more carbon footprint than what has gone into producing that plastic. So it's a trade-off finally, right? And people say that the mineral water guys are the bad guys. I think it's important to understand this slide well. Almost half the country, about 468 villages, districts to be precise, have contaminated groundwater. And if you look at the urban population, just look at urban population. Only 47% of them have a pipe delivering water into their house, or supposed to deliver water into their house. And you've got 40,000 children getting impacted by diarrhea because of contamination. So mineral water or pure water is a requirement and needs to be affordable to consumers. And when we evaluate the different options that are available for us, look at that. We need to take all this into consideration. What is going into processing, manufacturing, transportation, and the reprocessing piece. You look at the final carbon footprint that's coming out of every alternate that's available to us. Look at PET, look at a beverage, look at an aluminum can and a glass bottle. People say glass bottle is infinitely recyclable. United States produces about 12 million tons of glass bottle every year. Hardly 30% get recycled, and the rest takes about 1 million years to decompose. But believe me, it's not all bells and whistles for plastic, because this is staring at us in our face. And we generate in India about 3.4 million tons of plastic, and it's time that we wake up to do something about it. However, what's very interesting is that almost 60% of plastic in India, the plastic waste as we call it, and I would prefer to call it used plastic, gets recycled. And this is the per capita consumption of plastic. And you can see that India is about 11 as compared to 109 of United States. And the world average of PET reprocessing or recycling is about 30. And in India, about 92% of PET gets recycled. Now for the next wave of plastic circularity, because people have been talking about reduce, reuse, and recycle, right? What is that we require? If you have to move beyond that 60% and hit a 90% and lead the world in terms of recycling and reprocessing plastic, I think to my mind there are fundamentally two things. A change of behavior in the way as consumers we need to get humble to handle plastic, the used plastic, segregate it. And the next piece is about how do we value add and upcycle the plastic. And let me take you through that possibilities. I think 80% of littering on the streets, what we find is deliberate, intentional. As consumers, we need to figure out ways of moderating our consumption, accept packaging which is minimal and try and reuse it. And post-use, dispose it responsibly. I mean, if you look at Indian population, we are a very value-conscious population. Look at that. We keep newspapers so safe, it's getting you only 8 rupees. A PET bottle gets you 15 rupees, but your tendency is to throw it out of your house the first instant. Possibly the awareness about the value of used plastic has not gone into our minds. So that's about behavior. Second thing is about circularity investments. You know, as manufacturers, we have to conform to certain regulations of the country. And when we look at the landscape, we find that there's a lot of business which happens in this space. You can see the numbers. It's a 10.2 billion industry in plastic recycling by 2030. But however, as a practical scenario, when I look at it, the industry is concentrated in the western parts of the country, maybe towards the up center, maybe let's say a Panipat, a Gujarat, a Maharashtra. One odd industry coming up in Tamil Nadu, but look at a Kerala, a huge consuming state. Look at an Orissa, another huge consuming state. There are no recycling industries which can upcycle the product. They can degrade the product. So degradation is not about getting value from the product. So this is something for us to think about, that if real plastic circularity has to happen in this country to the next level, we need to create circularity investments in building infrastructure across the country. The next piece is about innovating to create those value-added products. Look at that. 21 billion bottles of PET delivering 1 billion t-shirt. How much is a PET per bottle? 15 rupees a kilo. What will possibly go into a t-shirt will cost about 80 rupees. And what's the price of a t-shirt which we buy? A good branded, nice t-shirt is about 800 to 2000 rupees range, correct? That's the potential for value addition. And we must figure out ways of making this entire process interesting. That's something which is already happening, but it needs to happen beyond the pilot stage, move into a kind of mass movement. And there are people who are, the well-known designers are adopting recycled plastic into their fashion. And not just that, that's my college mate Shankar presenting the Prime Minister with a Modi t-shirt. I mean, look at that. You can't have a better brand ambassador than Modi for plastic circularity, right? And I think government plays a very important role. It's been doing a lot of work. I think a very well thought out things have been happening, both in terms of the plastic waste management rules of 2016, or the EPR policy of 2022, or the legislation which has come out banning the straws and bags and all that in 2022. And there is also restrictions for importing used plastic. Now, that ensures that the manufacturers will have to seek out plastic from the domestic market, creating that pull. I mean, I just touched upon this earlier. We were talking to somebody why plastic is not getting picked up in a state like Kerala, for example. In Maharashtra, a producer, a recycler will pay you 15 rupees to collect your plastic. In Kerala, consumers have to pay 15 rupees to the guy who is collecting plastic. Think of it. Now, he has a justification because the cost of transportation from Kerala to a Maharashtra processing unit is significant. So there's no free lunch, and somebody has to bear it. So unless that enabling infrastructure is put in place, it will continue to suffer. One very interesting thing that has happened recently is about this entire national green credits. It's about rewarding and incentivizing people for voluntary actions on waste management. So you get green credits which are tradable in a platform like carbon credits. It's a slightly large subject. Maybe another occasion we'll talk about it. But they're creating a platform where incentivization for environment-friendly actions are going to be there, which are going to be tradable. So if as a company, I'm doing something beyond what is my regulatory obligation, I'll be able to trade it to somebody who's got to meet it. Interestingly, there are a lot of best practices globally. I mean, it's not just the developed countries you see on the right side, which are Germany, Norway, Japan. Japan, in fact, has moved into packaging for bottles which are pure PET. The bottle is PET, the cap is PET, the label is PET. Recycling, you don't need to segregate anything, just chuck it into the thing. It will go into the PET cycle. Or if it's HDPE, it's all HDPE. Make life simpler. But look at the examples from Bangladesh. You know, I used to look after Bangladesh in one of my earlier assignments along with India. And I used to wonder, a non-vegetarian country, there is no plastic bags, and people buy fish every day from the market for their consumption. They got used to it. They carry their steel vessels, cut the fish, put it into a jute bag and bring it home. They have banned it and ruthlessly enforced it. Look at a country like Sri Lanka. I was there, in fact, last November, I think Unavatuna beach. The beach was clean, and I was really impressed. So I asked the shack guy who was in front, I'm really impressed that your beaches are very clean. He said, no, every half an hour I send somebody to pick up the litter. I said, but why? What is your obligation? He said, the government fines me if there is a litter in front of my shack, because I have contributed to that litter. I thought that was very interesting. I mean, listen, Sri Lanka is not a richer country than India, right? But enforcement and behavior change can happen simultaneously. That brings me to our story in Bisleri, the industry story. Sustainability has been part of our DNA in some sense. We possibly imported one of the first plastic recycling machines in India. And I'm privileged to share that we are both plastic neutral. Actually, we collect more than what we put into the market. And we replenish more water than we take out from the ground. And we were one of the first FMCG companies in the country to achieve this. Not only that, just reflecting on the last year, there's a lot of design engineering which we have done in our packaging that we were able to reduce the virgin plastic consumption by 10%. There's a lot of focus in reusable jars that we have, which is about the 20-liter jars. That's a significant chunk of our business. And obviously, the earlier slide, you saw that we actually collect and recycle more. So we are addressing all these three. But I think inherently, we believe as an organization that we have to stimulate this change in behavior with consumers. And as a corporate, we also have a role. Educate people to sort waste. Because whenever you talk to a recycler, the biggest challenge is that, how do I don't have the technology to sort mixed waste. It's too cumbersome, too expensive for me. So unless it happens at the back end, it doesn't work. So this is what we do. We have an app where we tell consumers, we actually go to institutions, apartment complexes, and educate people that used plastic is not waste, it's money. If you don't need that money, give it to your housekeeping. But just clean that plastic after you eat the food, which comes to you from a container. Clean it and give it to the housekeeping guy. We will ensure it is picked up and sent directly to recycling, and we monitor the entire value process. The proceeds from this benefits either the middle people who are there or the rack pickers for whom we run programs. And it's done at scale. We are present, including Bangalore. 13 municipal corporations, we are active. And that's the kind of footprint that we have today. We have touched almost 6 lakh consumers, talking to them, educating them that we need to change our behavior and life can be better. I'll just play this, possibly sums up our approach. Can I have the last slide, please? I think there are a few things which we can do as consumers. There are a few things which the industry should do, and there are a few things we seek support from the government if the plastic circularity has to become successful. Consumers, it's talking about moderating their consumption and changing their behavior in terms of disposing used plastic. And for trade, it's about taking accountability, like I said, of any consumption happening in the premise. They should be accountable for sorting it and sending it for recycling. And organizations like us, we need to keep innovating further, providing one, reduction in virgin plastic consumption in the design, and secondly, create those innovations which will fetch higher value for the final product, which can be reintroduced back into the system. And from the government, it's a big opportunity for India to be at the leading level in terms of plastic circularity in the world. We're already recycling 60%. We can move into a 90% plus and set the example for the world. And today it's so much more easier because we are possibly the most digitally connected country in the world today, big in digital payments. So anything you want to reward and incentivize people can happen in that space. And the last one, like I said, my education was through my son who prevented me from littering. I think if you catch kids young, introduce plastic circularity in the curriculum, we will get the next generations being more aware that Used plastic is a very valuable material. We shouldn't be throwing it out. Rather, we should recirculate it. Thank you so much once again. Thank you.